Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. I want to begin today by saying something simple yet powerful. You matter to God. Your story, your pain, your healing, it all matters. And if you're here today, it's not by accident. You're here for a reason. God has something to say to your heart. Today, we're going to talk about something many suffer from in silence, the emotional toll of being married to a narcissistic husband. Now, I know that's a heavy subject, but let me remind you of this promise from Scripture. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. This isn't just about pain. This is about purpose and pain. This is about finding your voice again, reclaiming your worth, and knowing that you were never created to live under emotional oppression. God did not create marriage to be a prison. He created it to be a partnership, built on love, respect, and mutual honor. So let's walk through this together, with truth, with grace, and with the kind of hope that doesn't disappoint. Narcissistic love is conditional and controlling. In a marriage where one partner is narcissistic, love is often used as a bargaining chip rather than a genuine emotional connection. At first, everything might seem ideal. The narcissistic husband often starts off charming, attentive, and overly affectionate. He may overwhelm his wife with gifts, compliments, and promises of a perfect life together. This stage, sometimes called a love bombing, is used to quickly gain trust and attachment. But as the relationship settles, the true nature of this love begins to show. It's not rooted in selfless care, but in control and self-interest. The narcissistic husband expects constant admiration, obedience, and attention. If his wife doesn't meet these expectations, his affection becomes cold or completely withdrawn. His love depends on how well she satisfies his emotional needs, boosts his ego, or conforms to his demands. This makes his love deeply conditional. It's not about mutual respect or shared growth, but about performance. If she questions him, asserts her own needs, or simply expresses independent thoughts, he may punish her emotionally through silence, withdrawal, or harsh criticism. She starts to feel that her worth in the relationship is tied to how well she serves him. Control is a central part of the narcissistic dynamic. This control can be overt, such as telling his wife what to wear, who to talk to, or how to behave, or it can be subtle and manipulative. He might undermine her confidence with backhanded compliments or make her doubt her own memory and feelings through gaslighting. For example, if she brings up something hurtful he said, he may deny it completely, saying things like, "You're too sensitive," or "That never happened." Over time, she begins to question her own reality, making her more dependent on him for validation. This control extends to all aspects of the marriage. Financial decisions may be made solely by him. He may monitor her phone calls, question her every move, and isolate her from family and friends. He frames this behavior as concern or protection, but in reality, it's about limiting her freedom. The goal is to keep her emotionally and physically dependent on him so that he can continue to control the narrative of the relationship. Her world begins to shrink. Her dreams, goals, and even her sense of identity are slowly replaced with what he allows, approves, or demands. In public, the narcissistic husband often appears loving and supportive. He may praise his wife in front of others, give the impression of a perfect marriage, and show her affection that he withholds at home. This duality confuses her even more. When she tries to speak out or seek help, people often don't believe her because he has carefully crafted an image of the perfect husband. This public-private contrast isolates her even further and reinforces the belief that she must be the problem. What makes the situation even more painful is that the wife may constantly try harder to earn his love. She thinks that if she just says the right thing, avoids conflict, or becomes a better wife, he'll go back to being the man he was in the beginning. But that early version was a mask, not the truth. No matter how much she tries, the goalposts keep moving. His affection is given and taken based on her compliance. It's not love. It's control dressed up as care. Eventually, she may lose her sense of self. She might forget what it feels like to be genuinely loved, accepted, and valued. Her self-esteem erodes, not because she's weak, but because she has been systematically broken down. The constant emotional roller coaster of affection, followed by rejection, keeps her in a state of anxiety and confusion. She doesn't know which version of her husband she'll wake up to, the kind one or the cold one. This unpredictability is a deliberate form of psychological control. It keeps her focused on him, always trying to please, always hoping things will change. Love in its true form is patient, kind, and safe. But in a narcissistic marriage, love becomes a trap. It's used as a tool to dominate, to manipulate, and to maintain power. The wife may feel guilty for even thinking something is wrong because the narcissistic husband has convinced her that she is ungrateful, difficult, or even mentally unstable. This is how deep the conditioning can go. She stops trusting her own voice, her own needs, and her own experiences. And this is exactly what the narcissist wants. Control disguised as devotion. Emotional manipulation replaces honest communication in a marriage with a narcissistic husband. In a healthy relationship, communication is the bridge that connects two people, where thoughts, feelings, needs, and concerns are shared openly and respectfully. But in a narcissistic dynamic, this bridge is intentionally broken. The narcissistic husband doesn't seek genuine connection through communication. Instead, he uses words as weapons or tools to distort reality, protect his ego, and control his partner. Instead of listening to his wife's thoughts or feelings, he redirects conversations back to himself. If she brings up her concerns, he may twist the narrative so that she ends up apologizing. If she expresses hurt or frustration, he might mock her, minimize her feelings, or accuse her of being too sensitive. Over time, she learns that opening up only leads to confusion, invalidation, or punishment. As a result, she begins to silence herself, not out of peace, but out of fear of conflict and emotional backlash. Gaslighting becomes a common tactic. The narcissistic husband denies things he said or did, challenges his wife's memory, or acts shocked at her reactions. He might say, "I never said that," or "You're imagining things," or even, "You always twist everything I say." These statements chip away at her trust in her own perception. She starts to feel unstable, unsure if her emotions are valid or if her memories are accurate. This mental fog serves his purpose. It makes her more dependent on his version of reality. Another common method of manipulation is blame shifting. When arguments arise, the narcissistic husband rarely, if ever, takes responsibility. Even when he is clearly at fault, he turns the situation around and places the blame on his wife. He might say, "I wouldn't have said that if you didn't provoke me," or "This is your fault for making me angry." He deflects accountability and projects his behavior onto her. Over time, she begins to carry the weight of every issue in the relationship, believing that if she could just do better, things would improve. Silent treatment is also used as a form of punishment. Instead of resolving conflict, the narcissistic husband may withdraw completely, refusing to speak, acknowledge, or engage with his wife for hours, days, or even weeks. This emotional coldness creates deep anxiety and confusion. Over time, she starts to feel like a failure in her own home. This ongoing pattern of criticism affects not only how she views herself as a wife, but also how she sees herself as a woman. She begins to internalize the idea that her thoughts don't matter, her choices are flawed, and her emotions are too much. What used to make her feel confident now becomes a source of shame. The things that once brought her joy, her hobbies, career, friendships, start to fade as she becomes more and more focused on pleasing someone who cannot be pleased. Her world begins to revolve around avoiding criticism rather than living freely. The erosion of identity is subtle. It often begins with small compromises. She stops wearing a certain color because he said it looked bad. She avoids laughing too loudly because he said it was embarrassing. She pulls away from friends he disapproves of, even if he never said it directly. These changes may seem minor on their own, but collectively they strip away her individuality. The vibrant, independent person she once was starts to disappear, replaced by someone constantly walking on eggshells, unsure of who she is outside of his expectation. Her inner voice becomes quieter with each passing day. She second-guesses her decision, worries about saying the wrong thing, and fears judgment in even the smallest actions. The narcissistic husband feeds this insecurity, often using it as proof that she needs him. He positions himself as the more rational, capable one in the relationship, making her feel like she couldn't manage life without his guidance. This dependence keeps her tethered to him, even as she loses sight of herself. What feels like protection is actually control masked as care. In public, the wife may appear composed and agreeable. She has learned to present a version of herself that aligns with what her husband wants, pleasant, supportive, and silent. Behind closed doors, however, she may feel invisible. The person she once recognized in the mirror now feels unfamiliar. Her self-esteem suffers not because she is weak, but because she has been systematically undermined. Even moments of personal success are tainted by his dismissive remarks. If she gets a promotion, he might downplay it. If she receives a compliment, he may scoff or joke that people don't really know her. His need to feel superior means she cannot be allowed to shine. This emotional suppression affects her mental and even physical health. Anxiety becomes a constant companion as she tries to anticipate his moods and avoid conflict. Depression can follow as the weight of constant criticism drains her spirit. She may lose interest in things she once loved, become isolated from others, and feel a deep sense of loneliness, even while sharing a home with her husband. Her sense of worth becomes entirely dependent on his approval, which is rarely given and often revoked. The most tragic part of this erosion is that the wife may not realize it's happening until she feels completely lost. She might look back and wonder when she stopped feeling joyful, when she stopped laughing freely, or when she last felt like herself. The change was so gradual, so quiet, that it didn't register until the reflection in the mirror felt like a stranger. This slow disappearance of self is not a result of personal failure, but of enduring constant emotional attack disguised as partnership. Spiritual abuse can mask as religious duty in a marriage where the husband is narcissistic and manipulative. Faith, which is meant to be a source of comfort, guidance, and mutual growth, becomes a weapon in the hands of someone who uses religion to dominate rather than to serve. The narcissistic husband often cherry-picks scriptures, doctrines, and religious traditions to reinforce his authority and control over his wife. He redefines what it means to be a good wife in spiritual terms that serve his ego and silence her voice, turning something sacred into a tool for emotional oppression. He may constantly remind her that a wife must be submissive, quoting religious texts without context or balance. He uses these verses not as a way to build a loving, respectful partnership, but as a way to demand obedience and suppress any disagreement. Any attempt by the wife to question his decisions, voice her pain, or assert her individuality is labeled as rebellion or disrespect, not just to him, but to God. This manipulation creates a deep inner conflict. The wife begins to feel that standing up for herself is not only wrong in the eyes of her husband, but sinful in the eyes of her faith. The spiritual pressure becomes overwhelming. She is told either directly or through constant implication that her suffering is a test of faith, that patience and silence are signs of holiness, and that endurance is her spiritual duty. When she cries or breaks down, he may respond with, "You need to pray more," or "God is using me to shape your character." These statements don't offer support. They minimize her pain and shift responsibility away from his toxic behavior. She begins to carry the emotional weight of the entire relationship, believing that her prayers or spiritual devotion can somehow change him. In many cases, the narcissistic husband presents himself as the spiritual leader of the home, demanding respect for this role without truly fulfilling its responsibility. He may lead prayers, quote religious texts, and participate in religious activities publicly, presenting the image of a devout and righteous man. To outsiders, he appears deeply spiritual, a model of faith and discipline. This public persona makes it even harder for the wife to express what's happening behind closed doors. When she tries to speak about the abuse, others may not believe her. Or worse, may advise her to submit morere or trust God's timing, reinforcing her isolation. The narcissistic husband often uses guilt and fear to control his wife spiritually. He may tell her that God will be displeased if she questions him, or that leaving the marriage, even mentally or emotionally, is equivalent to spiritual failure. He instills fear of divine punishment and paints himself as the bridge between her and God. Her own relationship with her faith becomes entangled with his demands, making it difficult to separate spiritual truth from manipulation. She may feel distant from God, not because of her lack of devotion, but because she has been spiritually gaslighted into believing that obedience to her husband is the highest form of worship. This spiritual manipulation often silences her voice within the religious community. She may feel judged, unsupported, or ignored when she seeks guidance. Leaders and fellow believers, unaware of the emotional and psychological abuse, may encourage her to stay in the marriage for the sake of spiritual duty or family image. These responses, though perhaps well-meaning, deepen her wounds and confirm the narrative the narcissistic husband has been pushing, that she is the problem, that her role is to endure, and that speaking out is a betrayal of her faith. Her personal relationship with God becomes strained. What was once a source of comfort and refuge now feels like another layer of judgment and pressure. She prays not with peace, but with desperation. She reads scripture searching for answers, for signs of hope, but often through the lens of what her husband has taught her. She wonders if God hears her, if he sees her pain, or if she is being punished. Her faith, once a lifeline, feels like a chain. This confusion doesn't come from God, but from the distortion of his word by someone who uses religion as a cloak for control. Despite the pain, she may continue to strive harder to meet the impossible standards set by her husband. She may fast, pray, read more, do everything she can to become the kind of wife he claims she should be. But the more she gives, the more he demands. The spiritual bar keeps moving, and with it, her hope begins to fade. She feels invisible in her own faith journey, burdened by guilt, fear, and the weight of expectations that were never meant to be hers. Her spirituality, instead of bringing life and freedom, becomes something she uses to survive. Healing begins when truth breaks the silence. In a relationship shaped by narcissistic abuse, silence is both a survival strategy and a prison. The wife learns early on that speaking up invites punishment, denial, or dismissal. She grows quiet to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to protect her children, or simply to make it through the day without another emotional wound. This silence becomes part of her daily existence, and eventually part of her identity. She stops sharing her thoughts, her needs, her pain, and even her dreams. Her voice, once clear and strong, is buried beneath layers of fear, guilt, and confusion. But deep within her, something begins to stir, the ache of unspoken truth. The quiet whisper that says this is not love, not kindness, not safety. At first, the truth appears as small realizations. The way he talks to her in front of others, the constant double standards, the emotional games he plays, the loneliness she feels even when he is near. These moments begin to chip away at the false narrative she has been forced to believe. That she is the problem, that she is too sensitive, that she just needs to try harder. Truth has a way of finding its way through even the thickest silence. Truth doesn't come all at once. It comes in fragments and waves, sometimes in painful flashes that make her question everything she's built her life around. It can be terrifying to admit that the man she loves is also the one who has caused her the most harm. That the marriage she's held on out of hope, loyalty, or faith is also the place where her soul has been slowly breaking. Accepting this truth feels like betrayal of him, of the vows, of the life they built together. But the deeper betrayal is the one she has endured in silence, the betrayal of her own heart, spirit, and truth. Breaking the silence means daring to name the abuse for what it is. It means using words that she has been afraid to say: manipulation, control, gaslighting, emotional neglect. It means acknowledging the ways she has been hurt, even when no bruises were left behind. It requires courage to stop minimizing the pain and start validating her own experience. The truth demands to be seen even when it's uncomfortable, even when it disrupts everything she thought was true. And once that truth is spoken, even if only whispered to herself, it becomes the first step toward healing. This process often begins in solitude, in journal entries, in quiet prayers, and late-night tears when everyone else is asleep. But eventually, the need for connection grows stronger. She begins to seek out safe spaces, perhaps a trusted friend, a counselor, a support group. Saying the truth out loud to someone else is a radical act of reclaiming her voice. For so long, the narcissistic husband has controlled the narrative, telling her and others how she should feel, who she is, and what her marriage looks like. Speaking her truth disrupts the control and begins to restore her sense of self. With truth comes clarity. She begins to see patterns she once ignored. She starts recognizing the difference between love and control, between leadership and domination, between care and coercion. She reflects on how her behavior has been shaped by years of emotional conditioning, not because she is weak, but because she has been surviving. And in that reflection, compassion for herself begins to grow. She stops blaming herself for his actions. She begins to understand that what she experienced was real, that her pain was valid, and that she is worthy of love that doesn't require her to shrink. Healing is not a straight path. The truth can be overwhelming, and the journey is filled with grief, anger, confusion, and moments of doubt. There may be times she considers going back, silencing herself again, pretending everything is okay. But each time she returns to the truth, she grows stronger. Each time she chooses honesty over denial, she moves closer to freedom. Her healing may begin in hidden corners, but it expands with every step she takes in truth. Her story begins to shift, not from victim to hero, but from invisibility to visibility. Eventually, she starts to rebuild not just her life, but her sense of self. She reconnects with parts of herself that had been lost. Her creativity, her laughter, her dreams. She discovers new boundaries, new values, and a new definition of love. Her voice, once buried, becomes her strength. She no longer feels the need to apologize for her truth or justify her pain. She has lived it, survived it, and now she begins to rise through it. Truth has become her foundation, and silence no longer holds the power it once did. So today, as we pull back the curtain on the silent suffering behind closed doors, let us remember, no woman was created to be small, to be silenced, or to be shaped by someone else's control. Marriage was never meant to be a battlefield where love is lost to ego, where faith is twisted into fear, or where identity slowly disappears under the weight of someone else's brokenness. Healing begins when truth is spoken. When a woman finds the courage to name the pain, to reclaim her worth, and to believe that her voice was never meant to be buried. This isn't just a message for those who have lived it, but for all of us, because silence protects the abuser, but truth sets the victim free, and freedom, once it begins, cannot be stopped.